all for coming down to in the Clay County and especially Brasstown, North Carolina. I am Clay Logan, one of the commissioners here in Clay County. Want to welcome y'all here. I hope you had a good trip over. I was worried about the weather real bad there for a while. I didn't know whether you'd get here or not, but I'm glad you did. We got a good crowd. It's going to be enjoyable. You're going to like it. Let me tell you a little bit about logistics. Down the hall down there, there's a men's, women's restroom. And up here right beside the door where Wanda's waving her hand is we call it the IT restroom. It's his, it's hers, or it's its. So we try to cover everything here in Brasstown. But anyhow, I want to thank y'all for coming, and I want to tell you one little thing. I was listening to John Kennedy from Louisiana. Y'all know him? He makes some great talks, don't he? Well, I'm going to quote him. I don't want to get in trouble now. I'm going to quote him. And he said, you know, we can accomplish all this stuff by being nice and being good and showing the love, but carry a gun. Simple as that. At this time, I want to introduce Barbara Deese, our chairman of the Republican Party in Clay County. Give her a big hand.
Thank you. I'm shorter than Clay, so I'm going to come up here. I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Republican primary District 11 congressional debate. And I want to thank you all for coming today. I know we're in a far out place in the most beautiful spot in the state, and some of you have come quite a way, so we do appreciate it. We have worked hard to bring you a lively and informative program today. So I would like to start by asking the Reverend Harold Holbrook of the Fort Henry Baptist Church in Hayesville to come up and give the invocation, please.
We bow our heads. Father, we come before you this afternoon and acknowledge that you are God of all. Lord, we know that you created everything and everything by and for. Rise and fall, and your word. That the hearts of kings are like streams of water in your hands, and that you turn them at your will. Lord, this that ever to line up with the gospel, or whether the world is spinning out of control, you are still sovereign. And that in you alone we can faith, hope, and trust. That we would be guided and the candidate. Lord, whether it's immigration, abortion, spending, taxations, issues of race, sexual immorality, war, or in the any other issue, Lord, may we be conformed not by the world, but rather than culture, experience, or the fear of being canceled. Lord, may all our positions and decisions flow from your word and our identity as your sons and daughters in Jesus Christ. Lord, we come asking that you sanctify and prepare us for this political season, not just for us in the entire country. It seems to be ever more divided and straining under the weight of economic uncertainty, decaying communities, increased violence in our cities, misguided priorities, financial mismanagement, and global unrest. Lord, we trust in your word as written in Romans 13, 1 and 2, that everyone be subjected to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist are established by God. So I ask that as these two men we today, that we would hear the truths of their hearts, that the questions will clearly, concisely, and truth. We, your children, will leave here with clarity of mind, thought, and purpose as we decide to whom we vote for in this upcoming election. Give us your wisdom and guidance to make the right decisions according to your purpose, and continue to bless this day and all the households gathered here. It is in Jesus' mighty name that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Holbrook. Next, I would like to take a minute to lead everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance. You would, as you're able. I am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now I would like to, I apologize for this, it just didn't happen. I'd like to introduce Michelle Woodhouse, who is the District 11 Chair, for a few words.
For hosting this incredible event. So I have the great honor and distinction of serving as the Congressional District GOP Chair, and our word for this year going into the election is at a precipice. It is spiritual warfare. And if we don't win in 2024, there might not be a country left for us to fight for after this election. I thank both of our candidates for being here. What we need to look at, each and every one of us, start at the bottom of that ballot. All politics are local. The top of the ballot is sexy. It gets all the stories. Fox News talks from the This is where North Carolina begins. I said to someone, we can see Georgia from our window, which means we can see Stacey Abrams from our window. And they are coming for Western North Carolina. The Democrats have made it very clear. Rural North Carolina is target number one. That means you, and that means me, and not on our watch, friends. So I encourage you to get involved, be bold, have strong conversations. We are doing an incredible event here February 10th. There are flyers in the back. Mark Robinson will be joining us. Cherokee County is where we'll start at 11 in the morning. Bold and courageous in Macon County that day for lunch. The only lieutenant governor. And Mark Robinson up in Polk County that night. So plug in with us. Get 11.org. You can find all the goings on there, and I'm here.
Thank you, Michelle. Now I would like to turn the rest of the program over to Larry Ford, who is our, excuse me, he's our vice chair, our general counsel, and more so, he's today's debate moderator.
Thank you, Barbara. And it's a pleasure to be here. Well, looks like we're having all sorts of problems with mics today. Give me yours. Can you? Well, let me start over. Thanks for being here today. I'd like to go over a few ground rules. Opening statements will be given by the candidates and by coin toss prior to opening. The first candidate to give an opening statement will be Christian Reagan, followed by Chuck Edwards. Thereafter, we'll go into the questioning. The questions are timed. We should have about 75 minutes worth of questions and answers. This is a moderated debate, meaning that there will be no questions from the audience. The candidates themselves hopefully will stick around for some time period after the debate ends to answer individual questions. We would ask that you hold applause to a minimum. We don't want applause detracting from either candidate's responses. And hopefully we'll all observe the Ronald Reagan admonition as far as treating fellow Republicans, and that's not to say anything ill of a fellow Republican or to not to treat them ill, and that goes for supporters as well. We've got a sitting district court judge here who is our timekeeper for today, Judge Tessa Sellers. So she can issue bench warrants if you get rowdy. And we got the sheriff's office here to enforce and serve those warrants. So hopefully it won't come to that. And we'd like to give a shout out to our sheriff, wherever he is, Mark Buchanan. There he is over in the corner. And I also see our district representative, our House of Representatives, our representative for the House in North Carolina, and that's Carl Gillespie. And forgive me if I've left some other dignitary out, but that's all I see. Oh, Mike Clampett. Mike Clampett, representative, where are you? Over here. Okay. See, I couldn't see through Chuck, so that's why I didn't see you. Pardon? Judge Forga's here. See, I thought Barbara was going to do this, but I'm just trying to pick up as we go. All right, let's begin our debate. Gentlemen, if you are ready, then the opening statement will be by Christian Reagan, and you got to hold this mic like this. You guys can hear me, right? It's not dropping out, right? You got to treat it like a carrot, not an ice cream cone. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Larry. I started this campaign about 10 months ago, and I did it because I love my country. The country that I see today is a country that I no longer recognize. 2024, in my opinion, is the last best hope for America. I really believe that. I believe as individuals who love this country, who love God, who love family, I believe that it's important that we get involved in politics today. All I could tell you is, guys, from the very beginning, it has been hard work to get to this point, to get my name on the ballot. And today, during the debate, you're going to be able to hear what I believe is important in this country. And on March 5th, hopefully, you will vote for me. But let me tell you this. I'm a strong supporter of Donald Trump. He's the only guy in this country that can drain the swamp. And I want to be in Congress so that I can help him do that. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Am I close enough to this? I really appreciate all of you, these patriots that love this country so much, as do I, which is why I'm serving in the United States Congress now. I appreciate the Clay County GOP inviting me out, inviting us out. Better know the voters out here out west. I know that someone mentioned to the National Citizen Times not too long ago, why in the world would Chuck Edwards only 2.5 miles from the Georgia line? Well, the reason that I'm here is because I love you, and I love these mountains, and I love this country. And I get too few chances to come out here in the far west, particularly while I'm serving in Washington, D.C. In fact, I just got back from Washington, D.C. last night. I wish that I could be a messenger of right now, but I cannot. And that's because Joe Biden is in the White House. And since Joe Biden has been, we've had 8 million illegal aliens come across our border. The number one policy that is on everyone's mind here in America right now. It's a major threat to the safety of our communities, especially right here in North Carolina. We're seeing trafficking, killing folks with addictions, and the open border is the key core problem to our society today. My Republican colleagues and I have stood firm in pushing for more aggressive measures, particularly through H.R. 2, that would close the border. And we should all applaud Governor Greg Abbott for taking measures on his own to control the border in his state. The fact is that Biden's Justice Department is now suing the state underscores just how out of touch that Joe Biden is. As a state senator, our Republican leadership in the House and the Senate outlawed sanctuaries, reinstituted voter ID, and cut your taxes. We can do that in Washington once we change the occupant in the House. That's the foundation of my campaign. Thank you all for being here and giving us a chance to have this discussion.
Clay Logan is our resident audio expert, so you may have to get up there again. I don't know. All right, at least this one's working now. The first question goes to Mr. Edwards, since the opening statement went to Mr. Reagan. So, and the first topic that we're going to consider is congressional stock trading. Citizen watchdog groups have called out the practice of members of Congress trading in stocks of companies which may be affected by congressional action, alleging that such trades often occur before the public is aware of such action. Existing law bans members from trading on non-public information, but still allows members to trade in stocks as long as the trade is reported within 45 days. However, recently introduced legislation, backed by both conservative and progressive lawmakers, would ban outright the ability of members of Congress to trade stocks while in office. Mr. Edwards, do you support such legislation, and why or why not?
What I would support is stocks to be traded in a blind trust, and so the member would not have a direct influence on a particular trade and would not even know that a trade would be taking place in their name. One of the things that folks do not realize is when you're elected to Congress, you're no longer allowed to. And so I believe that it's only fair to allow folks to take the wealth that they may have created, a few dollars that they may have, and hand that over to someone else to make the decisions. But as far as a particular member being able to trade on inside information, I'm certainly opposed to that.
Well, I'm in agreement on that. I would definitely would not want to be in a position as a congressman where I had inside training information and was able to use that to my advantage to make a profit for my family. I would never do that as an individual, and I would never do it as a congressman, and I think it should be forbidden and prohibited by Congress.
Mr. Reagan. Mr. Reagan, do I understand your response to be that you would ban all trading by congressional members, whether in a blind trust or individually?
Yes, I do. I think that when Congress has an opportunity to see information before the public, there's always going to be a temptation. And I just feel like if you're going to serve in Congress, you should not be in a position where you can take advantage of that. And so, yes, that would be my answer there.
Mr. Edwards, any response to his statement?
No. Nothing further.
All right. We'll go to the next question, and this question will be addressed to Mr. Reagan, and it concerns social media. Social media platforms are increasingly the place that Americans go to express their views, debate issues, and gather news and information. However, social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, now known as X, since Elon Musk bought it, have come under fire for reportedly suppressing content from conservative sources and users and actively colluding with the Biden administration in doing so. With some social media platforms, the concern appears to be more serious. For example, as reported by The Guardian, TikTok, a Chinese-owned social video app, has been cited by a number of governments around the world as being, quote, Chinese spyware, end quote. And its parent company, ByteDance, admitted employees had attempted to use the app to spy on reporters. This has resulted in a number of governments banning the use of the app on their computers by employees. And in fact, the U.S. government, Texas, South Dakota, and Virginia have banned the use of TikTok on government-issued devices. And even North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper issued an executive order doing the same. Therefore, the question is, since there is legislation pending in Congress to ban the use of TikTok or other social media apps under such circumstances, even further, would you support such legislation?
Well, I'll tell you what, I would not be standing here if it wasn't for social media. I can guarantee you that. When we started this campaign, that's all we had. And we've advertised on TikTok, we've advertised on Facebook, every social media platform you could think of, we have advertised on those programs. Now, I've taken advantage of the social media and the activity that I see on a daily basis. But you know what? It's a freedom that I feel that we have to be able to decide where we want to go and be able to participate in social media. So I would be reluctant to be against any social media platform in the country. I think that you and I are smart enough to realize what's going on with TikTok. And if you feel like it's a problem that needs to get resolved, then you use your money to do that. It's called a free market. And that's what we need to do as a country, is that if we make choices in our life, whether we like something or not, we can do that through monetary policy. Thank you.
Would you mind asking that question again? I was getting some IT advice while you were asking it.
Okay. The entire question?
Not just the question part.
Well, the question was related to there is legislation pending in Congress to ban the use of TikTok, if not other social media apps, even further than these other governments have gone so far. Would you support such legislation?
The thing that folks need to recognize and why social media has been weaponized is because Joe Biden is in office. I'm really proud to have been serving on the House Oversight Committee as a new member. I was really pleased to get appointed to the Oversight Committee, where we brought folks from the FBI and from the social media companies under oath and uncovered the fact that social media is being weaponized against the American people and to slant towards political opinions. And that's just totally wrong. And so I think the first thing that we have to do, which is what I've been fighting for in the year that I've been honored to be in Congress so far, is to stop the weaponization of our federal government against our people. That's the core. I believe that folks should be able to make a decision what platforms that they want to use and under what circumstances, but we've got to get Joe Biden and the weaponized federal government out of the White House if we're really going to enjoy our freedoms in this country.
Mr. Reagan, would your response remain the same even if investigation by the federal government determined that TikTok or another social media platform was being used by a foreign government such as China to endanger the national security of this country?
Well, I'm for personal freedom. And like I said, the social media platforms that you decide to use should be your business. As far as China and what they're doing with TikTok, that's a real problem. I understand that problem. In Congress, if we're able to identify that issue and we're able to resolve it through legislation, I'm in agreement with that. But for the government to shut down a social media platform because they don't agree with what's being said, that's a real problem. And so I'm for personal freedom. That's what I represent. And that's my final answer, guys.
Mr. Edwards.
And that, was that a new question, or are you asking me to rebuke his answer?
The clarifying question was, even if the governmental agencies investigate and determine that a social media app like TikTok or another actually was being controlled by a foreign country and endangered our national security, his response was he would still allow that app to continue in the marketplace. And what is your response?
I don't trust the federal government to decide what we ought to be looking at and what we should not be looking at. And I certainly have learned that by sitting on the House Oversight Committee and asking folks under sworn or under oath how they have been coordinating, how they've been colluding with one another. For example, under oath, I had a line of question for the FBI, and it was clear that they were colluding with social media folks. So what we have to do is stop the weaponization of federal government against its citizens and allow our citizens to make decisions for themselves. Those folks who are at security risk, such as myself, serving in Congress, we're under strict orders of what devices we can use and under what circumstances. Those are the things that should be observed to protect our national security interests.
All right, next question goes to Mr. Edwards. As it has for some time, the Middle East continues to generate crisis after crisis, many of which present an opportunity for the U.S. to become deeply involved. The Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, followed by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen attacking shipping vessels transiting the Red Sea, have resulted in the U.S. becoming more involved, from providing material support to Israel to U.S. naval forces taking direct action against Houthi attacked vessels, and of late, actual attacks on their bases in Yemen. On January 11th, Iranian forces seized an oil tanker with ties to the U.S. in the Gulf of Oman as retribution for a previous seizure of Iranian oil traded in violation of international sanctions against Iran. And that resulted in the U.S. and U.K. attacking Houthi staging areas overnight on January 11th with, I believe, maybe one more follow-up attack. The Houthi and Iranian actions run the risk of international trade, especially the crude oil markets, becoming destabilized with likely negative effects upon the U.S. economy. As a member of Congress, do you support or would you support direct U.S. involvement in confronting these aggressors?
Let's all recognize the reason that our world is in such a dangerous place today. It's because we've got a weak president, one that continues to sit on his haunches and watch these horrendous acts taking place, such as the dictator Putin, the murderer Putin, rolling through Ukraine with intentions of going through Europe. And the world leaders all over are watching his responses and his lack of response. So, Mr. Moderator, with all due respect, the thing that we have to do first is get a strong leader, such as a Donald Trump, back in the White House. We need to support our troops at all costs, because those folks are over there taking risks every single day. This world is a very dangerous place if America does not have a strong backbone, a strong leader in the White House, and a strong Congress that is willing to support the troops and keep them functional, operational, continuing to invest in technology, in weapons, and overcome the overmatch that we currently have with China.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of the war machine in this country. Since 1990, we spent $14 trillion. We sent our men and women overseas and they've come back. It's absolutely horrific what we see in our VA hospitals with psychological needs, with the injuries that are sustained in war. $14 trillion since 1990 we've lost. It's unbelievable the kind of money that we spend on the military to police the world. And as a nation, we can't afford it anymore, guys. We're $34 trillion in debt. We are broke as a nation, and yet we're policing the world, and we're spending a lot of money. Now, I will say this. With Israel, I support Israel. And I think that what we need to do is we need to defend that country because, number one, it's God's country. But more importantly, it's democracy. So we need to support that nation in the Middle East. But I'm just telling you guys, we have got to get away from policing the world because it's destroying us economically and we're broke as a nation. And we have to admit that as a nation.
Our nation's debt is a whole nother conversation. But probably the number one responsibility that this country has is to protect its citizens and to protect its borders. And outside of Biden's failed border policy, he has failed defense policy. We have never been weaker. We have never had less respect in this world than we do today. And I thought that I heard from the gentleman from Smith County, Texas, that we're spending too much money to defend our country. I would suggest, and if you get an opportunity to look at the number of submarines, the number of nuclear missiles that China and Iran and Russia has relative to the United States, you would agree that we are not spending enough on our defense. There are plenty of other ways that we can save money, but protecting this land is number one. It should be number one for the federal government.
Well, I believe in a strong defense. I believe in a strong military. I don't think that's the issue at all, Congressman. The issue is we're spending way too much money policing the world, and it's costing not us, our generation, but it's costing our children and our grandchildren their future as a country. I support a strong military. You talk about the southern border. You just said it was 8 million people that illegally crossed the border. It's 10 million, Congressman, in the last 3 years. This country's in trouble, guys. And it's in trouble because of people like this, who are the elite that represent Washington, D.C. And they come here and they have the jargon. They have it down.
Okay.
But the point is, we've got to change how we do things as a country. And we will never do it with people like this.
Due to those remarks, we'll allow Mr. Edwards to respond again.
I need the gentleman from Smith County, Texas, to recognize there is nothing elite about Chuck Edwards. I was born over here in Haywood County. I got to watch my family's lights turned out many times. I got to watch our car repossessed. I lived in mill housing. I lived in trailers. and I've worked my tail off all my life like my mother and my father did. There is nothing elite about this person who has asked to go to Congress and represent you, because I understand how hard people in these mountains work and what it takes to live the American dream. I totally reject anyone that thinks that I am elite. My wife and I once went and found 83 cents so that we could buy kerosene to keep our house warm through the night so I could get paid the next day. That is not elite. Thank you.
I think you've had your say. We're going to move on to the next question now.
I never used the word elite. I never used the word elite. No, sir, I did not.
All right. Before I have to call the sheriff, we're going to move on to the next question. A little bit of an overlapping question perhaps, but we're going to cover it nonetheless. Since Russia's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine through early December of 2023, the United States has sent more than $75 billion in cash and equipment to Ukraine for its defense. Many Republicans in the House and Senate are questioning sending more taxpayer dollars into what is perceived as a, quote, faraway, end quote, conflict. In fact, on Thursday, a report stated, quote, the U.S. government failed to properly track more than $1 billion worth of weapons and military devices sent to Ukraine, end quote, according to the Defense Department's Office of the Inspector General. In light of this, and this question goes to Christian Reagan first, do you support continued funding of Ukraine in its fight against Russia? And if so, do you support increased supervision and or limits over the distribution of such aid?
Well, like I said, since 1990, we've spent $14 trillion on all these military efforts. We started out in Afghanistan, and when we started out, it was with the Taliban. When we left 21 years later, the Taliban was in control. We went into Iraq. We were looking for weapons of mass destruction, and we didn't find them. What we left behind was a destroyed Iraq that could no longer counter the efforts of Iran. And so Iran is in total control of the Middle East, creating havoc throughout the world. And now what are we doing? We're in Ukraine. We spent north of $125 billion in Ukraine. It's a slush fund. It's well established that the people that are receiving the money, it's not going where it needs to go. And so I'm against any money being sent to Ukraine. We shouldn't be a part of that. It's a European issue, and if they want to take the responsibility on themselves to do that, that's fine. But we don't need to be involved in Ukraine at all. And sir, I apologize if I called you elite. I apologize for that.
All right. Mr. Edwards, your response.
There's a common theme here, but I think that I can't say it too often. The world is such a dangerous place because Biden is in the White House, and he sat there for months and watched Putin send troops and equipment to the border, and Biden did nothing. I was brought up in a world where communism was a bad thing and where dictators were not allowed to invade adjoining countries and roll across continents, which is what Putin's goal is right now at this time. And so I believe that the world should come together to stop Putin in his tracks once and for all. But there are some things that come with that. Number one, we need to close our own border. And the action that I'm supporting in Congress right now is that while the White House is coming to us and asking for additional funding and equipment to send to Ukraine, we're putting our foot down and saying, not until we take care of our own border. We also know that there needs to be a clear objective with what's taking place in Ukraine right now, and there is not. our leadership, our House leadership, Speaker Johnson, a man of great faith, great rigidity, a good, strong conservative, came back recently and was telling me about a conversation that he had with Zelensky and the problems that the troops are having over there. But we know that they are not going to survive without help from the world. And we're sitting back and watching. We're willing to watch, presumably, Putin roll through Ukraine and Europe. And Xi and all the other world leaders are watching and taking note of the poor response from the United States. Communism is a bad thing. Dictators are a horrible thing, and we cannot continue to let them rule. But we do need to close our own border. We need to insist on a clear military objective, and we need to have true accounting of any U.S. dollar that goes to Ukraine.
Moderator has a follow-up question here to Mr. Reagan. Given your stance of we should be isolated from Ukraine and not taking part in the defense of, well, it's a part of isolationism. But anyway, you said we shouldn't be in Ukraine. We shouldn't be funding them. Is that correct? What if Russia succeeds at taking over Ukraine and then goes against bordering countries which are members of NATO, and some of the military members in this audience know what happens when NATO members get attacked? The U.S. is a NATO member and has to respond. So would you rather fight now or a bigger war later?
Well, what I would like to do is
I'm the
avoid...
moderator. Mr. Sheriff,
Oh, you want me to answer the question?
go ahead.
Okay.
If
Well,
you
what
can,
I'd like
if you
to
can
do
calm
is...
your supporter down.
Okay. What I would like to do is avoid the war altogether. That's what I would like to do. You're in agreement with NATO, Larry? Yes. If there's a violation there against NATO, then we have no choice. We have to support NATO. But I'm just going to tell you guys again, we do not have the money to police the world. We are broke as a country. And we have to come to that realization. And if we don't, one day you and I are going to wake up in a country. We're going to lose the status of the currency of our dollar. And when that happens, I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how much investments you have in this country. We're all going to lose. And that's on the horizon. And that's what we need to be worried about. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards, any response? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. And that would be addressed to Mr. Edwards. Millions of retired Americans rely upon Social Security and Medicare to meet their retirement income and health care needs. A 2023 report issued by the trustees for the Social Security and Medicare Trust Funds project, the report projects that Medicare's hospital insurance trust fund will be insolvent by 2031, and that Social Security's old age and survivors insurance trust fund will be out of reserves by 2033, which would result in Social Security payments of 20 to 24% and cuts in Medicare payments of 11%. This is not news, as this problem has been kicked around the halls of Congress for a while, many years. Many financial analysts and lawmakers have studied the problem, and some of the most often proposed solutions include the following: raise the full retirement age to as high as 70 years old, increase the earnings base on which Social Security taxes are levied from the current limit of $160,200 to a higher or even unlimited earnings base, increase the Social Security / Medicare tax rate, place a cap on the maximum amount of annual Social Security benefits that a retiree can draw, all of the above, or, as has happened most recently, do nothing. Do you agree that funding for Social Security and Medicare programs need, as we say here in the mountains, fixing? And which, if any, of the proposed solutions would you support?
It is true. Social Security is insolvent. And there is a point in time, I believe you referenced 2031, where if we don't do something different, then promises by the federal government will be broken to those folks that have worked all of their life. I'm certainly not in favor of breaking those promises, particularly to people here in the mountains that have worked so hard, and many have so little, and have counted on Social Security to get them through the later years in their life. One of the other positions that I have in Congress is serving on the House Budget Committee. And we've taken this subject very, very seriously. We recognize that Congresses have kicked the can down the road way too long. And right now, the House Budget Committee is working on pulling together a debt commission, which would include a number of senators, a number of House members, and a number of outside experts to look more closely at this situation and choose the recommendations that they believe would best help us out of this so that we can keep the promises that have been made to the people of America. And I have the personal goal of keeping the promises that have been made to the people that live and have worked so hard here in these mountains. The Debt Commission is the thing that I think is going to help us decide the best decision in moving forward. Thank you.
Social Security is the golden promise. It's the golden promise that was given to you and me when we first got into the workforce. And all those years that we worked, put into a system. It's the golden promise given by the government that when we retire, those monies are going to be available. Right now, we have 70 million people on Social Security. Next year alone, we're going to have 5 million added to those rows. The average recipient payment is about $1,600 a month. If we do nothing right now, what we're going to be faced with is a shortfall of about 25 to 30% within the next 12 years. So I'm not an expert on how to resolve the issue, but I have read and studied. And what they say is, if we do a combination of 3 different things, we can make it solvent for the next 75 years. Number one, the minimum age limit, if we could increase it from 62 to 63, that would be a big help. The contribution into the system right now is 6.25%. If we raised it to 6.5%, that would help as well. Currently, when you pay Social Security, there's a cap of $160,200. If we increase that to $200,000, that will make a big difference. But if we do all those 3 things together, then it'll make it solvent for the next 75 years. Thank you.
Mr. Edwards, any further statement or rebuttal? All right, we'll move on to the next question. And this one goes to Mr. Reagan. The U.S. House of Representatives is currently considering in committee an impeachment inquiry into President Biden with a possible impeachment of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas rumored to be in the works. Since any formal impeachment of a president or federal government officer must be heard in the Democrat-controlled U.S. Senate with a 2/3 majority required for conviction, the chances of conviction appear to be slim and none, and apparently Slim has left town. Should the House of Representatives spend time, energy, and public resources on an effort that is likely to be DOA if articles of impeachment arrive in the Senate?
Well, if I were in Congress, I would definitely vote for impeachment. We need to send a message regardless of what the end result's going to be. The problem with our border is, I'm from Texas. I was born and raised. I've seen illegal immigration my whole life. I've seen the devastation that it does to local economies. It's unbelievable. But what we're seeing today is an absolute invasion in our country. Over 10 million people within the last 3 years have crossed that border illegally. They're coming into our country. We have no idea why they're coming here, where they're going. But we know this, it's costing us over $459 billion a year to be able to handle the transitional cost, the temporary housing. It's unbelievable what we're paying. But this is what's crazy. These people are coming from 117 different countries. And many of those countries are from the Middle East, where we know terrorism is a real problem. And those people are here right now in this country. And yeah, we need to send a message of impeachment. We need to send it regardless of what the end result is going to be in the Senate. That's what the American people want. That's what they want from the House of Representatives, who are controlled by the Republican Party. Sometimes we're going to lose, but sometimes you need to fight regardless, because you need to send a message of what's important to the American people.
Absolutely. We need to continue with impeachment hearings over both Secretary Mayorkas and Joe Biden. I'm excited to have been a part, again, serving you on the House Oversight Committee, a part of an oversight committee that got to start to peel back the onion and understand many of the problems going on with the Biden family and the 20 or so shell companies that were set up for no other reason than to bring money in from foreign nationals and other countries. I voted to, and you know the House had decided to go ahead and proceed with impeachment hearings, but the White House insisted that we needed to have a vote on that, even though court precedent said we didn't. And so I supported to proceed with the impeachment inquiry over Joe Biden and the problems that I've been able to help uncover so far with the Biden family. I cast my vote already in support of impeaching Secretary Mayorkas. Unfortunately, that vote failed, and so I'm anxious now to continue with the proceedings and have the formal hearings that would be necessary to satisfy the minds of some of those folks that voted against that. The American people deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know the truth before November of this year. And we might just find some laws that are not in place already that we need to put in place to prevent actions such as the weaponization and dereliction of duty that we've seen from the Biden family and from Mayorkas. So most certainly we should proceed with impeachment proceedings.
Any rebuttal? All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, unfortunately, you guys have already stampeded all over some of the remaining questions here, but we'll go through them anyway. And Mr. Edwards responds first to this one. The gross U.S. federal debt has now grown to roughly $34 trillion. The federal debt is now 123% of the gross domestic product. Most economic experts regard this as unsustainable. As Congress, quotes, holds the purse strings, end quote, where does the growth in federal debt stop? As a member of Congress, what are you prepared to do to stop the growth in federal debt?
It is true. This country is bankrupt. We are in horrendous financial shape. Joe Biden has added, let's round it off and say $8 trillion in the last 3 years. The 117th Congress spent money that we did not have, and they left the 118th Congress to try to clean that up. The tough part about that, although we have been putting forth resolution after resolution, plan after plan, and again, I serve on the House Budget Committee where I help put together a budget resolution that puts us back to saving $16 trillion in the next 10 years, and in the 10th year, we'd have a $130 million surplus. Those things cannot be a reality, however, until we have another branch of government under Republican control. There is no way that Schumer's Senate is going to allow that to happen. There is no way that President Biden is going to sign a resolution of that point. And so what we need to be doing right now is clawing back every red cent that we can, given the unbelievable thin majority that Republicans have in Congress. And that's exactly what I've been fighting for, like I did in North Carolina. But we're going to have one more branch of government to make that a reality.
Yeah, it's amazing we have a $34 trillion debt. Can you imagine that? Unbelievable. $34 trillion. Currently, every month, we're running deficits of $200 billion a month. Can you imagine that? $200 billion a month in deficit spending going forward. Our national debt service is going to cost us over $1 trillion a year. That's more than what we pay in military, and soon it's going to exceed what we're paying in Social Security, which is about $1.2 to $1.3 trillion a year. It's unbelievable the amount of money that this Congress is spending and the debt that they are unwilling to stop. And that debt is going to be upon our children and upon our grandchildren and their children. The good news is, we live in the greatest country in the world with unbelievable resources in oil and gas. And when we take control, and we will, we're going to take control of the House, we're going to take control of the Senate, and we're going to take control of the White House. And when we do, we're going to drill for oil, and we're going to drill for gas. We're going to build refineries across this country, and we're going to provide to the world the oil and gas that it needs on a daily basis. And for every barrel of oil that we use or we sell in foreign nations, we're going to get a levy on that. And that money is going to be dedicated to the debt solely. That's how we're going to get out of debt. Now, how we eliminate the deficits, you need to elect people that are willing to go up there and pull the plug and drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. You have too much corporate interest and lobbyist groups up there.
Time.
I don't think there's anyone in this room that would argue that we're spending way too much money. I can tell you there's some Democrats on the House Budget Committee that would argue, and they're trying to stick their head in the sand and say that the $34 trillion debt is not a problem. Beyond putting together more fiscally responsible budgets, like I was happy to do and be a part of with these fine legislators in North Carolina, Carl and Mike, we have a broken process in Washington. And so what I've recognized in the year that I've been there is we're trying to build a plane at the same time we're trying to fly it. The 1974 Budget Act is full of problems and many loopholes that folks since then have figured out how to use to add spending that the American people are not even aware of. There's tons of gimmicks that appropriators in the past have used to add more spending to the number that they put forward. And so we also have to fix the process. And on the House Budget Committee, I'm very, very deep in fighting for that for you right now.
All right. Next question, and Mr. Reagan will answer first. The U.S. government encourages the purchase of expensive electric vehicles, commonly called EVs, by providing a subsidy or rebate on the purchase of each EV ranging from $6,500 to $7,500. Purchasers of gas-powered vehicles do not enjoy such rebates or subsidies. As more experience with EVs emerged in the marketplace, many problems with the day-to-day operations of EVs have emerged. In fact, organizations such as the Association of Mature American Citizens and the Federal Society have pronounced EVs as a, quote, scam, end quote. As a member of Congress, would you support continued U.S. government subsidies of EVs? If so, why? And if not, what will you do to stop it?
Well, I'm not a believer in climate change. The only climate change I know of is 10 years ago when we were building our cabin up here in the mountains. I left at 5 o'clock in the morning in August, and it was 52 degrees. And when I got to Texas the same day, it was 104. So that's the only climate change that I'm in agreement with. This green energy, let me just tell you guys, it's a scam. That's what it is. It's a scam.
All right.
The prime purpose of green energy is to extract money from the middle class in this country and destroy it for good. Because I want to tell you that there are people in this world that want to dominate the United States of America, and the only thing that is in between their way and what they want is the middle class of America. That's the truth. I'm absolutely positive that if we have the right people in Congress, the right person in the White House, we can establish programs in the United States of America that is going to get us out of this debt problem that we have. It's going to create new jobs for America. But we have to drill for oil, we have to drill for gas, and we need to build refineries. We have 130 refineries in this country, 130. And only 13 of those have been built since 1977. That's crazy. We don't need to invest another dollar in green energy. We need to invest in oil and gas, exploration, and refineries.
And so the question, as I understood, was on electric vehicles. Hey, you might be interested to know, I heard a statistic not too long ago, 90% of all electric vehicles are still on the road. Fortunately, the other 10% made it home safely. There's a fallacy there that is trying to be rammed down our throats that we're just not willing to accept. I serve on a Congress that at every turn has been scraping to drag back the green energy funding through the Inflation Reduction Act. I serve on a House Oversight Committee that is working to drag back all of the requirements through the through the various federal agencies that would require standards that would essentially force folks into vehicles and dishwashers and gas stoves and things that they don't want to use, nor can they afford. There was even a House member in an oversight committee meeting a few weeks ago that I leashed out against. She went so far as to say, I think her name was Stansbury from New Mexico, she went so far to say in a committee hearing, you all are going to be driving electric vehicles by 2030, whether you want to or not. I totally reject that. And I don't believe that we should have a federal government that believes they can ram those decisions down our throats. If you want to own an electric vehicle, I think you have every right to go and do that and buy it at full purchase price without asking the people here in these mountains to help fund that. And I agree that we need to unleash the energy that we have here in this country. That's why I supported the lower energy cost bill, which was probably about the third bill that we introduced and passed in the U.S. House.
My follow-up question to both of you would be, as a member of Congress, what specifically would you do to stop this?
I'll be happy to answer that. We put a stop to the funding. There is billions of dollars already in the Inflation Reduction Act, so poorly named, from the 117th Congress, money that hasn't even been spent. Biden had allocated $2 billion to install electric chargers across America, and not one single electric charger has been used. And so what we have to do is to continue to fight to claw that money back, as we have been doing through the appropriations process, and eliminate the requirements, the federal requirements on emissions and all of the other things, all the regulations that effectively would force folks towards using manners of energy that they do not want to use. So claw back money and reduce the regulations.
Mr. Reagan.
Well, I would be in agreement with that. If I'm in Congress, I'm definitely going to stand up for the industries of oil and gas. I'm going to push for investments in building refineries across this country. I want us to be the major supplier in the world of oil and gas. We have more oil and gas to supply the United States of America and Texas alone for the next 200 years. It's unbelievable the amount of oil and gas resources that we have in this country. There's not another country in the world that even comes close to the resources that we have in this nation. And so I'm going to be an advocate for that. I'm going to be an advocate for building infrastructure for refineries. I want people to come back to work. And the cool thing about oil and gas is if you're able to control the price and it comes down, guess what happens with inflation? It comes down as well. We are an economy that was built upon cheap oil and gas. Absolutely.
Time.
And we need to sustain that going forward.
All right, let's go to the next question. And Mr. Edwards will answer this one first. And you guys have already stampeded all over it, but so I'm just going to pick out a couple of things and get to the core question. We know there's a problem at the southern border, and the Federation for American Immigration Reform reports that at least 16.8 million illegal immigrants are living in the U.S. We've heard the numbers that have come through during the Biden administration, and that it cost us annually at least $150 billion. More troubling to me, at least, and to some other people, are the reports of single military-age men from various countries that are antagonistic to the United States, such as China and Middle Eastern companies that are entering in record numbers. And there have been some reports of just the ones they've caught, and the feeling is that there are many, many more, as high as 1.7 million single military-age men that have come from these other countries that have entered illegally. And the former House Committee on Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green has reported recently that some 10,000 plus were Chinese nationals with ties to the People's Liberation Army. Some report that the number of those military-age men exceed the number of our armed forces in uniform. So it's becoming a national security crisis. As Congressman, what will you do to solve this problem?
Well, Mr. Moderator, with all due respect, it's no longer a crisis. What we see at the southern border is a catastrophe. And it's a clear abandonment of the job of the Director of Homeland Security and the President of the United States. And so what I have been fighting to do to close the border is I helped pass H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill in the history of this nation. And the things that bill would have done would be to restore the funding and begin to rebuild the wall. It would have revamped the asylum process that is being so grossly abused by the current administration. It would have changed the parole process, where folks can just come in and get a waiver to go off into the United States. It would it would have sent more border agents to the border. It would have invested in new technology. It would have taken all the steps that we need to do collectively to close the border. Regretfully, Schumer's Senate has failed to take that up. And so I have continued to advocate for taking the components of H.R. 2 and putting into other parts of legislation. If you look at the NDAA, you'll see parts of H.R. 2 in it. And we're at a leverage point right now with the White House coming to us asking for Ukraine funding to insist that we get the tenets of H.R. 2 in place first. And so being in the minority, and that's really where we're at right now. We have a slight House majority. We feel like we've got a majority by 3 right now. It'll be down to 1 in a couple of weeks. It may even be at 0 because Hal Rogers from Kentucky had a horrible accident last night. I don't know if you've heard, so we pray for him. But being in the minority in Congress, we're using every leverage point that we can to insist on those tenets. And I'll continue to fight for security at the border, just like I fought to outlaw sanctuary cities in North Carolina.
Time.
Well, being born and raised in Texas, I've seen illegal immigration my whole entire life. It's unbelievable what's going on in this country. And I think, actually, we probably have close to 60 million illegals in this country. It's unbelievable. 60 million. A lot of the people that come here, they come here for the reason of freedom. I get that, I understand that. If I lived in Mexico, I'd want to come here too. But unfortunately, they bring 2 things. Number 1, they bring poverty, and a lot of times they bring crime. And so you and I are paying for that. Every day, we're paying for that. And the problem gets worse. It just gets worse. Every year, it gets worse. It never gets better. And you and I are paying the price. And nobody in Washington, D.C. is doing anything about it. Everybody's pointing their finger as to who is their problem. And Washington, D.C. is not taking care of business, guys. All I can tell you is this. I love America. I love my family. And I love God. And if you give me the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., every decision that I make will be predicated upon those 3 things. I promise you that. For the first time in this country, we are in jeopardy of losing it. And we have to wake up as a people and realize we have to do things differently. And that southern border has to be shut down. We have to use the military to do it. We have to do that. We have no choice.
Any rebuttal?
Okay, problem at the southern border. Check. Problem at the southern border. Check. All of you recognize it. The gentleman from Smith County, Texas recognizes it. I recognize it. You recognize it. What I did not hear was any solutions beyond what we are doing right now. And I totally reject the idea that nobody in Washington is trying to do anything about it. From day one, this Congress, this House Republican Conference has been fighting to close the border. I went this past summer and visited the border myself and saw it for myself. And I came back and started working with Democrats to try to get some of them on board. And I do have a number of them now recognizing that there is a problem there we have to fix. And so I totally reject the idea that nobody in Washington's doing anything about it. Unfortunately, we do not have the political makeup in Washington right now to take the conservative actions that we'd like to make. So, thank you.
All I can say is the time for talk is over. I mean, we're way beyond that. You know, these guys come here and they come for reelection, and, you know, the two things they talk about is, you know, the reckless spending in Washington, D.C., and how the debt's out of control, and deficit spending is beyond something I've never seen in my life. And then they talk about the southern border and how the problems continue to progress. And I've seen that my whole adult life. The last 40 years of my life, I've seen this play out. The debt gets worse, deficit spending gets worse, and the southern border is a problem. Now, I didn't say that people in Washington, D.C., that they're not trying. I'm just saying that you guys are not getting it done. And it's over a lifetime of choices. I mean, my goodness, man, I'm 61 years old. I've been paying taxes for the last 40 years. So I've seen 20 election cycles in my lifetime, Congressman.
Time. All right. Next question goes to, no. This is a moderated debate, was advertised as such. Go back to New Jersey, wherever you came from, with a gesture like that. Okay. Go, Mr. Reagan. This question goes to you. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution states, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Some congressional scholars have explained that the states have the primary authority over election administration, particularly the times, places, and manner of holding elections. Conversely, this Constitution grants the Congress a purely secondary role to alter or create election laws only in extreme cases of invasion, legislative neglect, or obstinate refusal to pass election laws. As a member of Congress, would you support legislation that overrides state laws in the name of election integrity?
So the gist of your question is election integrity, correct?
Pardon?
The gist of your question is about election integrity.
Laws passed by Congress to override state laws in the name of election integrity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the most important thing that we have as a country is our freedom to vote. The second most important thing is that when we vote, that it is clearly reflects how we voted, and it actually counts, okay? As far as the state's concerned, that's the state's responsibility. So you have 50 individual states, and they come up with these rules and regulations regarding how a person's going to vote in their precinct, in their county, and in their state. And so that's the way we've been doing it for the whole time we've been as a country. But I think that election integrity is the most important issue in America today. Because when you go in to vote, you want to know that your vote counts. And I'm just going to say this. In 2020, that election was a real problem for America. When I woke up the next morning, I thought Donald Trump had won that election by landslide. But within the next 4 years, or next 4 days, what did we see? He lost that election. And it was done by a process that we know was unfair. And so states have an important role in how they establish elections. And I believe that the federal powers should not be involved in that at all. So that would be my answer, Larry.
Yeah, I disagree that the federal government should not be involved in that at all. I certainly believe that we can, on the federal level, as I have, worked to influence how states conduct their elections without trampling on Article 4 of our Constitution. I help introduce and write the ACE Act that provides key points of how states should conduct their elections. I believe that the federal government can say, as I did in this bill, that you should not be able to vote if you're not a citizen of the United States. In fact, in spite of the fact that there are states out there. And so, no, I would not be in favor of allowing states to be able to abuse our election system like that. Another provision of that is that states should not be allowed to take third-party money as zuckerbucks to influence their elections. And so, yes, I vehemently disagree with the fact that the federal government should not have a role in that. I wrote the provision of that act to eliminate ballot harvesting. No state in this country under that bill should be able to receive federal elections funds if they allow ballot harvesting. I came back from the border and wrote the provision that said that census should not count non-citizens, as President Trump had in place, and the Supreme Court overruled it. And then I went on and introduced the bill that I think we named it "No Representation Without Legal Immigration," which says that if non-citizens do exist in a municipality or a state, they are not included in the apportionment numbers for representation. So there are things that we can do on the federal level, and I've been fighting on that level to provide safer and more secure elections.
Well, I can assure you that I certainly are not in a position to support any illegal coming across the border and voting in a federal or a local election. So that's just not true. What I will say is the federal government has way too much power. And I believe that the states and individuals have control of their own communities and how they live their lives and the rules and regulations that they decide by. Now, I've already told you, number one, I'm for election integrity. And I think that needs to be important in every state in the union. That has to be important. So, illegal immigration, you know my stance on that. I certainly would not want it illegal to vote. That's crazy. I would not do that.
Mr. Edwards, you would like to respond to a statement you made?
Yeah, I agree. The federal government, in many cases, has way too much control. But this is an area where I believe the federal government has a responsibility. And so to sit there and say that the federal government should have no role in elections, I think is a mistake. We should use the authority that we have as a federal government to help ensure safe, secure elections. I will continue to use the authority of Congress to bring that to this nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end of the time allotted for this debate. I want to thank both candidates for coming out to the debate today, especially the long trek for Congressman Edwards out to this neck of the woods. Sure, some folks in Asheville thought they'd be driving off the end of the world to come out this far. And we hope it was informative, and I would encourage the candidates to stick around and answer questions from the attendees on an individual basis. Thank you for coming. This ends the debate.